Welcome to a jam-packed edition of Fantasy Football Today on CBS Sports Network, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I'm Dave Richard. Jamie Eisenberg is here. Adam Azer is here. There is a ton to get to. We will go through all of the starts and sits, and not obvious guys. You know what to do with the obvious guys, but we will go through start sits. We'll have some player props with Katie Mox. We'll answer your tweets at hashtag AskFFT and the injuries. Oh, the injuries. There are a lot of them. We'll get to them in a minute. But first, last night's game, the Thursday night game, the Vikings and the Rams. Jamie, on this show a week ago, I asked you to use one word to describe the Thursday night game. You said poop. Would this week's word be more like Puka, as in Puka Nacua? And the better question is this. Puka's back, Cooper Kupp's back. They were awesome. Who would you rather have rest of season?
I'll take the guy that I was drafting first, which is Puka Nacua. You know, he looked great, despite the fact that apparently he just started practicing on Monday after the long layoff with a knee injury. And, seemed to be the guy that Matthew Stafford was leaning on, and understandably so. He was making plays all over the field. It's disappointing he didn't find the end zone, but you'll take it. When you look at the numbers that he had, you know what he's capable of. Somebody on our Fantasy Football Today podcast asked if he still has the chance to get 1,000 receiving yards, and that would be awesome if he's able to accomplish that from week 8 through the end of the year. He's just amazing, and hopefully stays healthy the rest of the way.
30-20 was the score of the game, and I'm with you, by the way. Puka over Kupp rest of the year, and honestly, both these guys are like top 15, top 20 type of receivers in PPR. But Adam, high-scoring game, 6 touchdowns between the quarterbacks. Stafford looked amazing. I want to ask you, though, Sam Darnold was one of the fantasy darlings, no pun intended, to begin the season. Would you rather have Darnold the rest of the way, or would you rather now have Matthew Stafford?
Yeah, I would rather have Matthew Stafford. He averaged about 25 fantasy points per game and 6 point per passing touchdown leagues in the last 6 games of the 2023 season. That was, they got healthier and they just took off. Their offense was incredible. I don't really see a reason why they can't have one of the best offenses in football. We saw what they did last night against a good Vikings defense. The Vikings give up some points, but they see a lot of plays. They're a solid defense, and they really worked their magic on them. 30 points. It was fantastic. I would rather have Stafford, but Darnold has something like 115 more rushing yards than Matthew Stafford. That shouldn't be overlooked. Matthew Stafford is -7 rushing yards. And Sam Darnold has thrown the same amount of passes as Josh Allen. He has about 150 more yards. He has 2 more touchdowns. He does have 5 more interceptions. So he's been really good. I think we're starting to see some cracks in Sam Darnold. I don't know when they're going to fully show up because he has the Jaguars and the Colts up next. But I got to give him credit. I think the best might be behind Sam Darnold, or at least after these easy matchups coming up. Second half is going to be all Stafford. It's going to be an easy one. Stafford.
Just one thing that may change is they're going to get Hawkinson back. And so that might help Darnold. I agree with you, Stafford over Darnold. But just in terms of, we may have seen the best of Darnold. That's probably true. But maybe Hawkinson helps out. Maybe we get a little bit more Jordan Addison. Justin Jefferson is still one of the best in the business. So I don't think Darnold's completely done as a starting fantasy quarterback.
Do we need to talk about Kyron Williams and Aaron Jones? You know what to do with those guys. You know what to do with Justin Jefferson. You might be dropping Jordan Addison. That would make sense because I'm not sure when you would trust him other than as a bye week replacement. And Jamie's right. TJ Hawkinson reportedly will be back in week 9. Another stud tight end added to the fantasy roster this year. Okay, let's talk about some injuries now. We just finished wrapping on the quarterbacks. Let's look at quarterback injuries heading into week number 8. And there are some significant ones that we do need to talk about, the biggest of which being Jaden Daniels, who did practice on Friday. We don't know. We're recording this Friday early afternoon. We don't know whether it was a full practice, a limited practice, or even if he'll be designated as it did not practice.
You know what unfolded for them, right?
What do you go ahead and tell me?
They practiced in the tent so that the media could not see. And then when they
that doesn't sound like a full practice.
When they came out to practice, Jaden Daniels did not come out with them. And then Dan Quinn said that he did practice. So whatever they did in the bubble that they didn't allow the media to watch is either promising for Jaden Daniels and they're trying to keep it a secret, or very bad for him. But the fact that he's not practicing with the team, I would anticipate him not playing.
Okay, so Marcus Mariota would then be the starter. I would assume, Jamie, that you would not be interested in starting Marcus Mariota, but very quickly, Terry McLaurin, where do you have him in your rankings this
He's a number 3 receiver. I mean, it's a tough matchup against Chicago, which would have been tough for him with Jaden Daniels, but you overlook that because Jaden Daniels is so good. You've seen receivers struggle against this team throughout the course of the season. I just think that McLaurin with Mariota is not something I want to trust. So in a 3-receiver league, obviously I would still start him. 2-receiver league in a flex, depends on the flex, but I would not start him as one one of the top 24 receivers.
And you saw on the screen, Tua Tagovailoa will start for the Dolphins. I like the matchup against Arizona, and I think the Dolphins make up for lost time. Tua Tagovailoa, a top 12 quarterback for me. We'll talk about his wide receivers in a minute. Let's move on to the running backs that are on the injury report. And honestly, there's mostly good news here. Jonathan Taylor is expected back. Kenneth Walker should be fine. Kareem Hunt should be fine. Alvin Kamara should be fine. But we can look at Travis Etienne. Doug Peterson called him a game-time decision for Week 8, Adam. Can you talk about him and Bigsby and how you rate those fantasy running backs?
Yeah, sure. I think if Etienne plays, I'm going to prefer him to Bigsby in any league where catches count, half or full PPR. I expect about a 50-50 split with the carries, maybe 60-40 for Tank Bigsby, but Etienne to work on passing downs, Etienne to have at least 3 catches. Now, if they say he's going to play, but he's going to be limited, then okay, we can reassess. But if he's playing, this is kind of what I expect rest of season going forward. And the bottom line is I don't want to start either of them if Etienne plays. And if he doesn't play, I still don't really want to start any Jacksonville running backs. I'd rather see how this plays out, and I just don't think it's a good setup for Tank Bigsby. But he'd be a flex if Etienne doesn't play. And then did you want me to talk about the Bucs? Or
no, I was going to give that to Jamie, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Unless you hold on. Do you have a super strong opinion on Rachaad White or Sean Tucker or Bucky Irving?
I feel it's the same thing. I don't want to start any Bucks or Buckies, because they're all going to play. It's not going to be good. I don't think they're going to have a high-scoring offense necessarily like they have been with Godwin and Evans. So this is one where I definitely want to wait and see how this plays out. Rachaad White is my favorite guy. I'd say he's a flex in full PPR, and I don't want to start the other guys, but we'll see. We'll see how it plays out because Bucky Irving has been really good this year. But I do think Rachaad White's going to be their number one running back.
Yeah, I like White as a number 2 running back in PPR, but it's not a must-start variety. And I think you just look at without the receivers there, he just had 6 catches on 6 targets. He's a very efficient pass catcher. And I think just given the scenario of how this game will unfold, that they will be able to run the ball against Atlanta. But to what extent, we'll find out. And that's not necessarily White will, I think, win. But I think when they're chasing or third downs, or as we saw, caught 2 touchdowns last week, this is a guy that Baker Mayfield trusts and can lean on. So if Godwin and Evans were healthy, it'd be an easier situation to avoid. With those guys out, I think this could be an 8 or 9 catch game for Rachaad White. Wouldn't surprise me at all.
Probably a low ADOT game then for Baker Mayfield. I'm going to breeze through the tight ends, guys. I really don't think there's anything major to talk about here. You can see the list. Dallas Goedert, again, did not practice on Friday. I would say he's unlikely to play. I do think Ingram, Kincaid, Kittle, and Sanders will all play. Kittle and Ingram, the ones that you'll happily start. Kincaid, at this point, you might reluctantly start. And then Taysom Hill, an interesting stash candidate. He does play against the Panthers in Week 9. So if you've got George Kittle or Pat Freiermuth, you can add Taysom Hill now, and then you can go ahead and use him in Week 9. Moving on to wide receivers. This is the big mama. There are a lot of players with moving parts, or they're out already, what have you. We just learned before the show, Deontay Johnson's out for Carolina. That's probably a good thing for your fantasy lineup with Bryce Young out. But Jamie, Zay Flowers did practice. Can you talk about the Ravens wide receivers? Where do you have Zay Flowers ranked this week? And what about Rashad Bateman?
Flowers will be a number 2 receiver, probably a little bit lower than he has been just because how healthy is he coming off of the ankle injury. So you're still starting him. It's just, depending on who you're comparing him to. And again, no team's on a bye. So while the wide receiver position is banged up, you're starting him. It just depends on who else is on your roster. Bateman, I think, is boom bust number 3 wide receiver. He's had 3 straight quality outings of 11 PPR points or more coming off a huge game, 4 catches, 121 yards, and a touchdown against the Bucs. It was the Bucs. Their secondary is bad. So this matchup a little bit tougher just based on in terms of fantasy points allowed by position. But I think he's kind of locked in right now to this 5 or 6 target range on a good game, probably 4 targets consistently based on the track record of the season, but maybe he gets a few more opportunities without Flowers out there. So I don't mind taking a chance on Bateman. And certainly if you lost Evans, you lost Godwin, you don't have Brandon Ayuk, this is a good pivot play because you're tying yourself to the best quarterback in fantasy right now.
Jamie, hang tight. I want to ask you about Deebo Samuel, but before that, DK Metcalf didn't practice on Thursday, Adam. How would you rank the remaining receivers in Seattle? It's Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyler Lockett, and Jake Bobo would probably play a lot with DK Metcalf out.
Well, I hope that's not the case because if they keep JSN in the slot, then he's not going to have the boom week that I'm hoping for. His best game last season was when he played the most snaps of his career, percentage-wise, out wide. It was the game that DK Metcalf missed. So I'm really hoping that they use JSN differently this week. I'm excited to start him. I have him in a few leagues, and I'm excited to start him. I think he's a number 2 wide receiver. I think Lockett is basically in the same boat. I'm not starting Jake Bobo. If DK Metcalf plays, then it goes back to being I'm trying to sit JSN, start Metcalf, and Lockett's a flex.
Chris Olave should be back. I like him as more of a high-end flex for the Saints. Remember, there's no Derek Carr under center, so I'm not sure how good he'll be with Spencer Rattler. And we did see Tyreek Hill pop up on the injury report on Thursday with a foot injury.
Oh, I know what happened.
Should be good to go. Oh, you know what happened?
Yeah,
what happened?
He was so excited Tua was back. He was jumping up and down and hurt his foot a little bit, but he'll be okay.
Can you explain what happened to Jalen Waddle, because he's also been limited?
Same thing. They both got excited. They probably did like a little chest bump in the air, and maybe one guy need the other guy in the knee in the quad, so they'll be okay.
Heck of a chest bump. Okay, Jamie. So San Francisco, Deebo Samuel didn't practice on Wednesday. Maybe he did some chest bumps on Thursday because he was back in practice.
I hope not, because he's got fluid in his lungs. So let's not do that.
Well, hopefully he doesn't have that anymore. We need him for a full game. Are you starting Deebo Samuel if he's active on Sunday?
You have to. You just look at this offense, and certainly the defense that they're facing, the Cowboys defense, not the same, especially Micah Parsons isn't there. And so without Brandon Ayuk on the field, the targets should be up, the touches should be up. The one concern would be is if they're going to maybe be a little cautious with him because of coming back from pneumonia. They do have their bye week next week, so if the run game is going and they don't need to throw to the same level that they had to, let's say, last week or the last couple of weeks, then maybe Deebo Samuel doesn't have the high-end numbers. But anytime one of the top 3 receivers is missing and Ayuk is now out for the season, you should be very excited about Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. So hopefully that's what's going to happen.
Other wide receivers we're keeping our eye on: Jawan Jennings, doubtful for the 49ers. Allen Lazard, Ladd McConkey, Calvin Ridley, none of them practice on Thursday. I'm not sure if you're starting any of these guys anyway, but just something to be mindful of. Before we go to break, let's answer a post on X from one of you guys. You need help, we're here to help you. It's from Gene. PPR Flex, Olave, Flowers, Marvin Harrison Jr., or Chase Brown. Adam, who do you like best from that group?
Picking Flowers, LOL. Yeah, I'm going to go with Zay. If he doesn't play, I'll go with Marvin Harrison.
I think I feel the same way. I think that I feel like there's a bounce back opportunity for Marvin Harrison Jr., but this Dolphins pass defense has actually played pretty well. Quarterbacks have not done very well against them. I'm hoping that Flowers plays. He would be the one for me. When we come back, we will get into Jamie Eisenberg's start of the week, as well as other quarterbacks and running backs for you to start and sit. We're just getting started on Fantasy Football Today. We're back on Fantasy Football Today, talking quarterbacks and running backs start and sit for week number 8. And let's just lead off with Jamie Eisenberg's start of the week. It's C.J. Stroud of the Houston Texans. Man, I thought he was going to have a big game last week. He didn't come through. Why is he going to come through this week, Jamie?
It's a great matchup against the Colts, and he's got a great track record against them. 3 times in his career, he's faced them 22.7 fantasy points or more in both of those. And all 3 of those. In the 2 games last year, he was over 25 fantasy points against Indianapolis. I just think he's going to bounce back, and he's got a great track record coming off of a loss. So I think that's going to help his cause as well. A little bit more motivation. Look, he was just bad. The whole team was bad last week. And so this matchup back at home, I just think it all sets up for him to have a very strong performance. We've seen a lot of quarterbacks have big games against Indianapolis already this season, which is why Adam was talking about Sam Darnold, for example, facing the Colts in recent week in the upcoming weeks. It just sets up very well for CJ Stroud. I don't know if he'll be a top 5 quarterback like we thought he might have the chance to be last week, but he certainly should be a top 10 quarterback. And I think anybody running away from him is making a mistake based on what happened last week.
I've got him 9th. I still think he's top 10. And Joe Mixon had a pretty good game last week for Houston. I'm a little bit worried that he could end up taking a lot of scoring opportunities away from CJ Stroud. But look, last week Stroud was under pressure, really was way off his game. I do think he bounces back. I agree. He's a top 10 quarterback, like I said. So now let's rank some quarterbacks. I've got Dak Prescott, I've got Geno Smith, and I've got Kirk Cousins. Let's say I had all 3 of these guys on my team, and Jamie, I wanted you to rank them for me. How would you rank those 3 quarterbacks for week number 8? Cousins against the Bucs, Dak against the Niners, Geno against the Bills.
You got to put a little bit of an asterisk on this one because Geno Smith, as of now, does not have DK Metcalf. If he has Metcalf, that changes things a little bit. But Prescott would be 1, Cousins would be 2, and Smith would be 3. Dak Prescott's track record coming off a bye is absolutely amazing. In 7 career games after a bye week, he is averaging over 28 fantasy points per game. Only 1 time has he been below 22 fantasy points per game. His worst game was 18 points. He's been several times north of 30 fantasy points, which he was last year coming off a bye week. So it's a tough matchup against San Francisco. He obviously has not played well. Last time we saw him was miserable. against the Detroit Lions. But I'm going to buy into that history. I think just he gets an opportunity to reset, refocus. They do some things during their time off, and Dak comes off the bye week, and he lights up the 49ers.
Adam, do you have the same order? And then if I threw another quarterback in there just to complicate your life a little bit, Anthony Richardson. Would Anthony Richardson be closer to the top or the bottom of those three quarterbacks, now four?
He'd be closer to the bottom. I would have to put him last. And I think he has the most upside of the group. So I don't think this is a high upside group. I do have the same order. Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith. I'm hoping for 24 fantasy points. I'd take that from any of these guys. I'm not sure I see any of them having a big game. I mean, look, the last time Cousins played the Buccaneers, they only threw for 500 yards. So I don't know what you can possibly expect. But I don't see that happening again. Richardson bothers me. I've said this on so many shows now today. He's got a great setup. This could be a big game. It's just a good matchup with the way the Texans play. They can't defend mobile quarterbacks, and he already scored 30 points against them in week 1, but I can't trust it. He has 4-point downside, so he'd have to be last.
Right, I agree with that. And I do have the same order as well. Dak first, then Cousins, then Geno Smith. I don't think Kirk Cousins should be expected to throw for even half as many yards or half as many pass attempts, but he could still get a couple of touchdowns on Tampa Bay. I think the game script is different because that Bucs offense isn't going to be as explosive. Now, when we come up with these, rank these three pods, trios, whatever you want to call them, we also ask the audience what they think. So you guys had the chance to vote on X which one you like the best.
Oh, wow.
And how about Kirk Cousins running away with it? I don't know if we've had a quarterback poll this lopsided, with Cousins almost 60% the favorite going against us. We like Dak the best. We will reconvene next week and see. Maybe one of us will talk some smack to the others. All right, let's move to running backs. I've got 3 running backs that are interesting this week. You've got Najee Harris going up against the Giants. He had a good week last week. Chuba Hubbard's been awesome this year, but that whole Panthers offense is changing. And then Brian Robinson going up against Chicago, potentially without Jaden Daniels. Adam, how would you rank these running backs?
I'm going to go Brian Robinson Jr. number 1, Najee Harris 2, and way in the back there, I see your hand, Chuba Hubbard, last place here. But Brian Robinson Jr., Najee Harris, Chuba Hubbard.
Jamie, how do you see them?
Same order. It's a good matchup for Robinson, but you got to worry about the entire offense with Mariota starting. Najee's been very good the last 2 weeks, over 100 yards rushing in both those games, which is not something we expect from him. The Raiders matchup, you could see last week was just, I think, a good performance overall for the Steelers with Russell Wilson starting against the Jets. It's just tough to trust Chuba Hubbard. In his first 2 games with Bryce Young, he was miserable in the first outing against New Orleans. He bounced back in the second game, but I don't think you want to trust this. Just without Deontay Johnson there against a very good Denver defense, I think they'll be able to key in on Chuba Hubbard and make things uncomfortable for him. And this may be the last opportunity we see him as the starter because Jonathan Brooks is eligible to return next week. We'll see if that's something the Panthers decide to do. But this is not the way you want to see Chuba Hubbard go out. I think he's going to have a really bad game against the Broncos.
So when I have a different order. In fact, I have the reverse order. And when I sent it in, I was expecting Deontay Johnson to play. And I think that he actually helps the run game a little bit in Carolina because it's another player that defenses have to defend. But now that we know that he's out, I don't know if I like Chuba Hubbard. I don't know if I really love Chuba Hubbard to begin with anyway. For weeks, we've been ranking him as a top 12 type of fantasy running back. But now against Denver, Bryce Young under center makes it pretty obvious for the Broncos to focus in on him. So I'm making an improvisational switch. I'm going to put Najee Harris toward the top against the Giants. I still think he'll get a lot of work, be the lead running back for the Steelers, and maybe find the end zone again against the G-men. So put me down for Najee 1, Hubbard 2, Brian Robinson 3. But now let's see how you guys voted for these running backs. Which one was your favorite? And it's Brian Robinson. They agree with you guys. He is the favorite, and it's close between him and Najee. Chuba Hubbard not even in the same zip code. I've got one more group of running backs to look at. Who would you start in this order, or what would the order be between Chase Brown, Alexander Mattison, and Ramondre Stevenson? Adam, would you like to go first again, sir?
I would. Chase Brown would be 1 for me, followed by Madison in this brutal matchup, but he should catch a few passes. And Stevenson, look, the last time he faced the Jets, they got blown out. He had a horrible game. He scored something like 1 fantasy point. It was somewhere around there. So I'm going to go Brown 1, Madison 2, Stevenson 3. And it's really a shame. I just have no faith and no trust in Stevenson. I don't know how healthy he is. And it's so easy for him to get game scripted. So that's why he's last for me. And Chase Brown for the win here.
Jamie?
Yeah, Brown is the easy one to go of this group. I'm going to put Stevenson and Madison in the same back of the classroom with Chuba Hubbard. I just don't think it's a good matchup for either of these two guys. I would actually lean Stevenson more so than Madison, just based on the teams that they're facing. The Chiefs have just been so amazing against running back. So while Madison may catch a few more passes, I mean, who knows how long he'll stay in the game if they decide to make a switch and maybe give Zamir White an opportunity to try and run. Based on what happened last year, remember when they surprised the Chiefs in that Christmas Day game, and Zamir White was a big catalyst. But I just don't want to trust either of those two guys. So give me Stevenson in a slightly better matchup over Madison.
I don't like any of these running backs. I would try and stay away from them all. They're not in my top 24 at running back. And I like Ramondre the best because I'm not sure this Jets run defense is as good as we make them out to be. I mean, we just saw Najee Harris have a big game and a big run against them. That's something that Najee doesn't get. I wonder if the Patriots actually hang around in this game, bounce back after those soft comments that Gerard Mayo, their own coach, said it was about their defense, but I wonder if the offense can take it too. And I wonder if Ramondre Stevenson just kind of leads the way. There's not a ton of confidence with any of these running backs. I will go Ramondre Stevenson 1, and if it's full PPR, Alexander Mattison ahead of Chase Brown. If it's half PPR or non-PPR, give me Chase Brown ahead of Alexander Mattison. Let's see the results. Let's see how you guys voted for these three running backs, and it's a runaway for Chase Brown, 71%. No one wants anything to do with any Patriots or any Raiders players. I completely get it. Let's go to break, but before we do, let's answer a question. Someone tweeted us. Let's just answer it. Who do you find flexier? Jordan Mason, Devon Achane, Javonte Williams, or Garrett Wilson? Oh boy. Jamie, do you have a favorite? I like all these guys.
I like all of them as well, but Javonte has the best matchup on the table. He's coming off a 2-touchdown game against the Saints, and this is almost a similar matchup based on how bad New Orleans was last week and how bad Carolina should be this week. So give me Javonte.
Adam?
I'm going to go with Achane here. 7 catches in both games with Tua. I think the Dolphins offense gets going. Achane.
7 running backs have at least 13 non-PPR points against Carolina in their past 4 games. 7 running backs in 4 games. It makes you kind of want to think about Jaleel McLaughlin if you're desperate. I will take Javonte Williams. I agree with Jamie. Adam, thanks for joining us. You are now history. Katie Mox coming up next to go through her favorite player props in week number 8. Welcome back to FFT. Dave's here, Jamie's here, and Adam is still here. My bad. I thought that we were getting ready to talk player props, but we do have some wide receivers and tight ends to go over. So let's do some start and sit with some wide receivers. And again, not obvious names. You don't need to know to start Amon-Ra St. Brown or sit Jameson Williams. For crying out loud, Jameson Williams is suspended. He's not playing this week or next week. So let's talk about some wide receivers that you might have an actual question about, starting with these 3 guys. Romeo Doubs, 2 great weeks in a row taking on Jacksonville. Marvin Harrison, I don't know how many bad weeks in a row it's been for him, but he's taking on Miami. And then Darnell Mooney at Tampa Bay. Adam Azer, rank these 3 wide receivers for week number 8.
All right, I'm going to put Dobbs last, and then the first was tough, but I'm going to go with Marvin Harrison Jr., then Mooney, then Dobbs. And I keep thinking, why do I keep recommending Marvin Harrison Jr. as a number 2 wide receiver this week? I think it's this. I'm expecting a big game from the Dolphins offense and hopefully a season high in pass attempts for Kyler Murray. He is averaging, I think, 28 pass attempts per game. He's never averaged fewer than 33 pass attempts per game. So I don't think, while they will be successful running the ball, I don't think they'll be able to do it quite as much because they're going to be chasing points or at least in a high scoring game. So if we can get 35 or more pass attempts, that would be great. If we can get 8 targets from Marvin Harrison, that would be great. And I'm going to go with him 1, then Mooney, then Dobbs.
Jamie, you see it the same way?
No, Mooney for me is the easy one. Just looking at what he's been able to accomplish and what he definitely did against this defense the last time these 2 teams played. This Tampa Bay defense is awful right now at stopping opposing wide receivers. You saw what Rashad Bateman did last week. You saw what he did against them in week 5. They just give up a lot of big plays, a lot of big performances to quarterbacks, and a lot of big performances to opposing wide receivers. So he's not going to get 16 targets like we saw last time, but he can still get you over 100 yards receiving and score a touchdown. So Mooney for me is the easy one. I'll go Harrison slightly over Dobbs. You never know what you're going to get with the Packers wide receivers, so it's just a tough to say that he'll be consistent. But 2 games ago for Dobbs, he had the 2-touchdown game. Last game, he has a high volume in terms of targets and receptions. So I think he's safe in terms of the second Packers receiver. But I also agree with Adam that I think Marvin Harrison Jr. has the opportunity here in a potential shootout or where the Cardinals are chasing points for Harrison to maybe bounce back and play well. Just statistically, the matchup's not great because the Dolphins, for what it's worth, are number 1 in fewest fantasy points allowed to opposing wide receivers.
So I do have the same order as Adam. I've got Harrison 1, I've got Mooney 2, I've got Dobbs 3. All 3 of them are almost big-time dart throws, and Mooney probably does have the most upside and the most downside, and Dobbs has just been playing really well over the last couple of weeks. So why Harrison? I think Adam laid out a pretty good case for it. Let's see what you guys thought. We posed a poll with these 3 names, and it was close, and Romeo Dobbs is at the top. None of us picked Romeo Dobbs as the number 1 wide receiver, so that's interesting. Not sure that we really helped you guys out there, but Dobbs 1, Harrison 2, Darnell Mooney 3. I will say this in Dobbs' behalf, on his behalf. He plays the most of all of Green Bay's wide receivers. He plays just a little bit more than Jaden Reed, and then we kind of see Wicks and Watson splitting as the number 3 wide receiver and the downfield guy for that Green Bay offense. All right, 3 more wide receivers to look at, and it's going to be one of Romeo Dobbs' teammates, Dontavian Wicks against Jacksonville, Tank Dell against Indianapolis. Man, Tank Dell donut last week. Tyler Lockett against Buffalo. Jamie, how do you rank these 3 wide receivers for the upcoming week?
Yeah, Dell is my favorite. Lockett close behind him, just without the potential of DK Metcalf. If Metcalf plays, then it would be a pretty distant margin between Dell and the other 2 guys. I'm not trusting Dontavian Wicks. I think this could be a game where Christian Watson comes out and has a big performance. Wicks is just too much of a dart throw. You never know, like you said, Dave, which one we're going to get, Watson or Wicks on a particular week to week. And even though Jacksonville gives a lot of big plays, I think that plays more into Watson making them as opposed to Wicks. So Dell is going to bounce back in a big way, like we saw 2 games ago. First game without Nico Collins. I think he gets to the 7 to 9 target range. I think he gets 6 or 7 catches on top of that. And maybe we get one of the big plays from him, but he did score a touchdown 2 games ago. So like the setup for him against the Colts the best. Lockett's got a big opportunity if there is no Metcalf against a tough Buffalo defense, but the target should be there. Wicks, as you see, Sportsline not even close to having him in the same range as the other 2 guys. And I'm surprised he's not ranked in our consensus rankings, but that probably means one of us don't have him ranked. The other one probably has him lower. I'm going to guess you're probably the highest on that.
I definitely am.
But he would not be a starter for me even in 3 receiver leagues.
Adam, how do you have these 3 receivers ranked?
Yeah, I feel very similarly to Jamie. Tank Dell has 3 end zone targets in his last 2 games without Nico Collins. Pretty sure, I don't know if I'd call it a drop, but it was a borderline drop in the end zone. He almost caught a touchdown. He would have had 7 points last week if he had caught that one. But I think he bounces back. I don't see how C.J. Stroud could have a big game if Tank Dell doesn't do something. Now, I'm not expecting him to be top 12 or anything, but a top 24-ish kind of player. And then I would go Lockett. Could easily see Lockett having a big game. He's been really good this year, and now I'm not expecting DK Metcalf. Lockett would go to the back of the list if Metcalf plays, and Wicks is... I don't know what to say. You just asked us about Dobbs. I don't know what to say about Dobbs, Wicks, or Watson. It is a dart throw, but I am going to sit Dontavian Wicks when I can.
So I'm going to take Tyler Lockett first of this group. That's assuming that there is no DK Metcalf. If DK plays, then Tyler Lockett is in the back of the bus, classroom, whatever we're calling it now. Dontavian Wicks is going to be second for me. This is a stat that I found this week. With Christian Watson out in weeks 4 and 5, Wicks saw a target per route run rate of 29%. That means 3 out of every 10 passes or targets or routes that he runs. Out of every 10 routes that he runs, I can explain this, I swear, please. 3 of them were targets for him. That number increased to 37.5% with Watson over the last 2 weeks. So he's not playing a ton, but he's still getting those opportunities. And if you look at the target volume for him, it's looked pretty good. And Jacksonville does give up a lot of those big plays. And I'm a little bit nervous about Tank Dell coming through for one of those huge scores. We haven't seen that from him much, if at all, this year. He even had a touchdown opportunity last week. It was a short yardage one, not a deep ball. How did you guys see it? Let's take a look at the poll results for these wide receivers. And it's Tank Dell by a wide margin, 55%. Tyler Lockett second, Dontavian Wicks third. It's just like our projections to have Dell and Lockett toward the top and Dontavian Wicks not even a consideration. Guys, we haven't done a tight end trio for rank these 3 in a very long time. So I thought we'd do one this week. I'm going to give you Evan Ingram, Hunter Henry, and Cade Otton. And Henry and Otten were added off the waiver wire in a ton of leagues. You can still get your hands on Hunter Henry in some 10 and 12 team leagues. But I'd like you guys to rank these three. Adam, go ahead. You lead us off. How would you rank Ingram, Henry, and Otten?
Could see it going any way here, but I'm going with Cade Otten, Evan Ingram, and Hunter Henry. As far as Ingram goes, I don't want to pretend that week 1 did not exist. Week 1, he had 4 targets for 1 catch, 5 yards. Week 7, 5 targets, 5 catches, 35 yards. So in 2 of his 3 games, he's had 4 or 5 targets. In week 6, he had 10 targets. But the 4 or 5 target potential is absolutely there. Otten, I think, will easily do better than that. I think he'll get 7 or 8 targets, if not more. Otten doesn't do much after the catch. Otten doesn't make explosive plays. He's not a special player. We've seen him. He's been in the league. He hasn't really done much. So I don't want to put too much stock into him. But I just like him the best here. And then Henry, really curious to see what the targets look like with Demario Douglas, because there was 5 targets when Douglas played with Drake May and a lot more when Douglas didn't play in week 7. So I'm going to be a little cautious with Hunter Henry. So I'm going to go Otten, Ingram, Henry.
Jamie, you were pretty fired up about Cade Otten when we talked waiver wire earlier this week. Is he your top tight end?
It's close between him and Ingram, and Adam makes a good point. The only thing I'll counter with for Ingram last week is that the run game was working very well for Jacksonville, and I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case this week, so we could see them throwing the ball a little bit more, and the volume will be up like we saw 2 games ago against Chicago when he did have the 10 catches, unfortunately lost a fumble, but caught all 10 of those targets for over 100 yards receiving. So I think he's he's probably the safest and has just as the ceiling is just as high for him as it is for the other 2. So I'll take Ingram slightly over Otten. Adam, you said it, that Otten's got a great opportunity here. No Evans, no Godwin. 10 targets, 8 catches last week against Baltimore. It's not a matchup that you should fear against the Atlanta Falcons. So like the setup for him. And then Henry's interesting. It's really, like you said, the first game was not huge in terms of volume with Demario Douglas. But I also think this could be a situation where they're so behind and throwing a lot that we could see him have another strong performance here. So I think all 3 guys have top 12 potential, but give me Ingram and Otten over Henry.
I agree. I've got the same order as you, Jamie. Ingram, then Otten, then Henry. Let's see who the audience chose. Who is your favorite tight end out of these 3? And it's Otten. They agree with Adam. They're not even considering Hunter Henry. 9.9%. I guess that makes sense because he hasn't been picked up in nearly as many leagues as Cade Otten has. I think a lot of people view Otten as the potential top target getter for Tampa Bay. Say that 5 times fast, with Mike Evans out and with Chris Godwin done for the year. Before we go to break, let's answer a question off of X. Full PPR. I need to start one from Keenan Allen, Alan Lazard, or Jalen McMillan. Jamie, does this just make sense to just throw the dart for McMillan and hope for the best?
I'll take the guy playing Washington coming off a 2-touchdown game in Keenan Allen. So I hope Caleb Williams continues to lean on him. If you're like let's say you face Puka Nacua and maybe Justin Jefferson in the same lineup, or Kyron Williams, one of those receivers, and you're chasing points, sure, you can throw McMillan and just hope that his ceiling is higher. But I think Keenan Allen is starting to show something a little bit with Caleb Williams, so I'm going to bank on that over the other 2 guys.
Adam, do you want to stick around for the player props with Katie Mox coming up after the break?
I stink at those, so I'll let her take it away.
Good. Get out of here. We don't want you. Scram. Beat it. When we come back, it's player props with Katie Mox here on Fantasy Football Today.
Yeah, I can't hear.
Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. It's time for the BetMGM Player Prop Challenge. And last week, 2 and 3. Not great for all of us. And look at that. We all agree. We've got to start disagreeing a little bit, but we don't even know if we're agreeing or disagreeing until Katie Mox gives us her favorite player prop. So you can see it now. The records are not pretty.
No.
We promise to turn it around starting right now. And so joining us is Katie Mox. She is a player prop and sports gambling expert. She looks
enthusiast,
expert, whatever word you want to use, feel free.
Yes.
But first of all, happy birthday to today's Myron's birthday.
Happy birthday.
Myron's a coordinating producer here at CBS Sports, so it's great to have you here. Happy birthday. All right, enough being nice to Myron at this point.
Yeah.
You've got player props ready to go.
Yes.
You are going to tell us the name of the player and then the type of statistic.
Yes.
Jamie and I are going to try and predict what that number will be, and then that'll determine whether we go over or under the actual player prop. So we won't know the player prop itself until after Jamie and I give a guess on the stat. So
correct. And we got to make some money back here. All right, let's start with Jameis Winston and his pass yards.
Jameis Winston's back. First of all, I'm excited that he's back.
I'm excited too because I like this prop.
I bet they went low on Jameis. And I'm going to go...
Okay, Jamie says 1 billion. Wow. And
I'm going to go a little lower than 1 billion. I'm going to say 270.
Yeah, so the line is 230.5. I like the over. A billion might be a little too high, but look, we know Winston likes to chuck it, right? And even if he throws pick sixes, which we also know he'll do, just means he gets the ball back quicker in order to get us maybe this in some garbage time. And the Ravens have been pretty beatable through the air.
Right, sure. James, do you have a favorite receiver? If you had to start a Browns wide receiver? Wide receiver, not tight end, because Njoku's the early answer. Who do you like?
Still Judy.
Over Cedric Tillman.
Yeah.
Tillman had a pretty good game last week. A lot of catches anyway, a lot of volume. Okay, Katie, who do you have next week?
All right, next we have someone we did last week, a little different though, Saquon Barkley and his rushing yards. We did receiving yards last week.
We got burned by the receiving
We
yards
did.
last week,
We should have taken the other one.
It's Cincinnati. There, he's on to Cincinnati. How many rushing yards for him?
88 for Jamie.
I'm gonna go with 1 billion. Hey, if it's good enough for Jamie, it's good enough for me.
All right, yes. So I'm in agreement. The line is 80.5. I like this over. I was afraid of taking it last week versus the Giants. Ended up sailing over that one. Thought it was too much. And it's a good matchup for him because Cincinnati gives up 136 rush yards per game. He's averaging about 110. Same game, same prop, different person. Jalen Hurts rushing yards.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Chase Brown. Jalen Hurts has not been rushing like crazy lately.
Yeah, so that might be baked into his line, David. 15.
I'll go a little higher than that.
Where are you?
27.
27. So the line is 35.5. So I like you guys are taking the under. I'm taking the over on this one. No team has allowed more quarterback rushing attempts or quarterback rushing yards than the Bengals have. 4 quarterbacks have gone over this. Daniel Dimes, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, and DTR. So I feel like he has at least 7 rushing attempts per game. I like that we disagree because then our numbers might change a little bit here.
Well, hopefully for the better for two of us and maybe not all 3 of us. We'll
but it's still, we're not going to be locked in the same situation. All right.
Hold on. Where do you have Jalen Hurts ranked this week?
Top 5.
Top 5? Yeah. Okay, because I know some people are kind of worried about him because he hasn't been that great of a thrower, but I can't resist. I still think that he's going to be just fine. Only 14 pass attempts for him last week. That was a player prop that I lost. I was thinking that he would go over that number. He's
been very hard to bet props on, but again, 7 rushing attempts at least per game. I think this matchup going. You guys don't agree with me, but I think it's going over.
Okay.
All right. So here's another, maybe not star, Ray Davis rushing yards. Bills versus the Seahawks.
How many carries is he even going to get in?
Well,
for? I'm going to do this.
Okay, 18 for Jamie.
Style. And this just guarantees
0
the under.
Okay.
I just want to be on the
billions
under
and
for
the zeros. You guys are really coming with it today. All right, so the line is 24.5. I like the over, so I'm on the opposite side of you guys as well. Well, when you look at the conditions of this game, it's wet and rainy, right? So that's going to lead, I think, to a heavier run script. Obviously, Cook is going to get the bulk of the carries here, and of course, you have Josh Allen as well. But he's had at least 5 carries over the last couple games. He had a lot versus the Jets, and he's gone over this over the last 2 weeks. So I will take the over.
Okay, James Cook is obviously, or at least we think he's going to lead the way in rushing for the Bills. Where do you have James Cook ranked, Jamie?
Just inside the top 20. It's a good week for running backs, and he's not exactly been involved in the passing game, which is troubling. Yeah. But he has done a good job running the ball. So I think the one thing that works in your favor is I don't know how healthy he is. He had the toe injury, which kept him out of the Jets game, which helped Ray Davis have that big number. And then last week it felt like, okay, we got our lead. Let's just get him off the field because he was questionable coming into the game. So that could certainly play in Ray Davis's favor. But as Cook gets healthier, I think that's where Davis is a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
Okay. Interestingly enough. All right. How many more do you have for
this week? We've got one more.
One more. Last player prop of the week. Go for it, Katie.
Anthony Richardson, pass completions.
Oh, man, I shouldn't have erased the zero.
Not a strong suit. You can't do another 0 or another billion. How about that, guys?
Okay. So
we got to try to guess the line.
Okay. Trying to
guess
the line.
How many you think he'll have. Okay, 14 for Jamie.
Yeah, see, I've
13. Okay, so the line is 16.5. I like the under, so I'm with you guys on this one.
Nice.
He is inaccurate, I think, would be probably the best way to describe him. His completion percentage hasn't been great, under 50%, at about 48. He actually, over the last few games, has 2 more rushing attempts than he has completions. This is a tough matchup for him versus the Texans. So, under 16.5.
And if he were to get benched before he goes over this completions number, that would mean that it
you
would
still
be
hit.
A hit if it's under.
Yeah.
Right. So,
100%.
and they didn't do it last week, but I wonder if it gets in their mind. This is a division game. It's a must-win.
They're
if
in the
it's
playoffs
close
right
later.
now. I don't think they're benching him.
You don't think they're benching him?
I think they want him to get the reps.
Yeah, I think this is still. Look, he lost his rookie season. He didn't have a complete college career. You got to see what you have.
Yeah,
and so
sure.
While playoffs are certainly something that they would like to get, they're in the playoffs right now. Mm-hmm. And he attributed to a big game against the Texans. Who knows? This is a favorable matchup for him with the way he uses his legs.
Sure. I'm a little bit nervous about it. I don't want to use him in fantasy.
No,
if I can help it,
no.
I don't want to use him. We talked about
but he's a great DFS quarterback. He's a great option in Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues.
Well, he could
but
get
one quarterback leagues, you probably want to go with the safe route.
Yeah, sure. I think so. Like I've got Dak or Anthony Richardson. I'm starting Dak over Anthony Richardson. I never thought that I would do that, but just the way that his season has gone.
Oh, I'm starting Russell Wilson over him in one league.
I don't mind that either. I thought Russ looked great last week. Okay, so those are some interesting player props from you this week. Thank you very much. Sorry that we're not in agreement all the way through.
I actually like that better because then we can separate from each other.
Yeah, a little bit. We'll separate the great from the not so great, as it were. All right, let's answer a tweet before we go to break. Help out the public. Here's a question from Jacob. Chuba Hubbard or Rachaad White? Ooh, these are 2 running backs that are not going to be top 15 or maybe even top 20 options in PPR. Jamie, is the matchup and situation so bad for Chuba Hubbard that you'd rather start Rachaad White?
I would. I just think, again, involvement in the passing game is huge. Bryce Young is hopefully going to lean on Hubbard in the passing game without Deontay Johnson there. But against Denver, with that defense, with the quarterback situation, they just shut down Alvin Kamara last week in a very similar setup with a backup quarterback per se and a running back that has a little concern. So, yeah, Chuba Hubbard is on the bench and Rachaad White will be starting.
I agree that Rachaad White is safer, especially in full PPR, but I know what Chuba is capable of doing. This offense is terrible. How many touchdowns could they legitimately score? Maybe 1 for Carolina, but I think Chuba could score it. I will start Chuba, but it's an upside play in a tough matchup. I just think that he's kind of earned it because he's played so well. A little bit more of your questions, a little bit more of fantasy football today when we come back.
Back on FFT. Before we get out of here, let's answer some questions. First of all, underrated tweet, the Flexius. I feel like you guys didn't play into that as much as you could have. This one's from Brownie fan Mike. Where would D-Hop be on the trade chart since it was published before the trade to KC? How would it affect Juju on the chart, Dave?
I think he'll go up a couple of spots on the trade chart. I think we view him as a number 3 wide receiver, maybe close to a low-end number 2 wide receiver in full PPR. I bet we start seeing Juju Smith-Schuster dropped in fantasy leagues because Hopkins is now in the cheaps and because Juju's not playing this week.
He's dropped about 20% in terms of his roster percentage on CBS Sports. So, yeah, you want to have Hopkins, you want to drop Juju.
All right, next question. This one from Devin. PPR, Javonte, Debo, Waddle, or Pottle? Jamie?
I'm going to go with Javonte. I mean, just such a fantastic matchup against the Panthers. It's close with Debo, but I'm a little concerned about his health. I mean, anybody against Carolina is just fantastic.
And hasn't Javonte earned it now? It's been a couple of weeks where he's been really, really good.
All right, love it. Next question. All right, this one's just to Dave. Kyler, Nix, Goff, or May, 6 point per touchdown.
How do you get away from Jared Goff amongst these quarterbacks? The way he's been playing, hyper efficient, even without Jameson Williams, I think he's the one to start.
All right, next question. Okay, Devon Achane versus George Pickens for flex. Oh, yeah. And thanks, Vikings defense, for taking away my advantage. Current record 6-1, Jamie.
Love both these guys, but the higher ceiling is actually with Pickens. Achane's going to be fantastic also, but with what we saw Pickens last week against, with Russell Wilson, now against the Giants, I'll take him.
All right, last question here. Okay, Swift or McLaurin, full PPR 6 point TD?
This one's easy for me. DeAndre Swift has been playing well. He's rested coming off the bye. McLaurin doesn't have his quarterback, or at least we don't expect him to. DeAndre Swift is the easy start there.
Easy start there. All right, that is going to do it for FFT. I had fun with you guys today.
It's great to see you.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And you know what? Week 8 is going to be a lot of fun, especially if it's anything like that Thursday night game. Remember, you can always download our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find this show and every show Fridays, 1 p.m. on CBS Sports Network and on demand on YouTube. Search for Fantasy Football Today. Good luck in week number 8.